Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to a place where your pillow is stuffed with straw, your robes smell like goat sweat, and your only Friday night plan is chanting psalms until your voice gives out. You're standing outside a storm-battered monastery in the middle of nowhere, and the sky has exactly the same charm as a wet burlap sack. Rain slaps your shoulders, your hood's doing nothing, and your boots? Let's just say they gave up on being waterproof about 5 puddles ago. You knock, twice, then again harder, and the heavy wooden gate groans open. A pale, hooded figure peers out like he's auditioning for a haunted house. You're greeted not with a warm hello, but with a silent nod and the distinct smell of damp stone, cabbage stew, and something sweet and yeasty. You're soaked, you're cold, and there's a strange bubbling sound echoing from somewhere deep inside. Welcome to your new home, weary traveler. The medieval abbey where monks brew beer, follow rules stricter than a boarding school from hell, and still somehow manage to get a little tipsy without technically breaking their vows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow the monk through winding corridors, lit only by flickering oil lamps, your wet robe squishing with each step. There are no welcome banners, no embroidered throw pillows, just stone walls, whispers, and rules. You're here for sanctuary, maybe penance, maybe just to warm up, but already you sense something peculiar. Down one passage, past the scriptorium, where a young monk sneezes into a priceless manuscript. Oops. You're led to a small room that smells strongly of barley. Inside, a few monks huddle around an open vat. They're not cooking, they're brewing. You tilt your head. Wait, aren't monks supposed to be sober? That's the twist. Monastic life is full of rules. Silence at meals. No meat during Lent. Chastity, poverty, obedience. But as it turns out, the medieval definition of sobriety is a bit more, flexible. You're in a Benedictine abbey, where the rule of Saint Benedict governs every breath and bowel movement, but leaves just enough ambiguity to allow beer, liquid bread, they call it, to flow freely. You sit near the hearth, steam from the boiling mixture clinging to your face like an over-enthusiastic ghost. One monk stirs a copper pot with a paddle taller than you. Another adds a sack of dark grain, muttering a prayer. It's all very solemn, except for the burp echoing from someone in the back. You're not supposed to laugh, so naturally, you stifle a snort. Here's the historical kicker. Monastic brewing wasn't just allowed, it was encouraged. Beer was safer than water, filled with calories, and, this is key, it didn't count as a meal during fasting seasons. Historians still argue Whether the monks genuinely believed that, or were just really into loopholes. Either way, you're not complaining. A monk sidles up to you, handing you a wooden cup. You hesitate. You're new here. He gives you a look that says, "Trust me, this is better than the cabbage soup." You sip. It's warm, thick, slightly sour, with a deep earthiness that coats your tongue and makes your toes tingle. This is not your average bar pint. This is medieval magic. You start to doze off, right there on the stone bench, lulled by the rhythmic stirring, the low murmur of prayer, and the surprisingly comfy scent of toasted grain. Then someone drops a ladle. The clang ricochets like a cannon, and you jerk awake to find the abbot glaring. He doesn't yell, he just looks, and somehow that's worse. The monk next to you chuckles softly and says, "First night's the hardest." Then he takes another sip. Your second day in the abbey begins not with a rooster's crow or a bell's chime, but with a thump. Specifically, the thump of Brother Alric's wooden sandals against your shin as he prods you awake for matins. It's still dark out. You're not sure how dark, but your guess is coal mine at midnight. You shuffle into the chapel, robe twisted, head foggy. The others are already chanting in Latin, their voices echoing through stone like ghosts trying to harmonize. You try to follow along, mouthing sounds you don't understand. Dominus something or other. A few monks glance sideways at your off-tempo syllables. One of them definitely smirks. Rude. After an hour or two, time's weird here. You're ushered out for chores. No breakfast? Not yet. Instead, you're assigned to the brewery again, though no one calls it that. Officially, it's just the workroom near the grain stores. Like how the Vatican doesn't have a bar, but the Pope probably has opinions about wine. The place is already alive with motion. Brother Lambert stirs a mash with hypnotic precision, sweat beading on his brow like dew on medieval Tupperware. Brother Thomas tends the fire, and his beard already smells like smoked barley. You think back to last night's warm drink and suddenly understand why they all seem oddly cheerful for men who sleep 5 hours a night and wash maybe twice a week. Then comes the briefing. Not a pep talk, more of a stern reminder, whispered with alarming intensity. You are to follow the rule. The rule governs everything. Eat in silence. Speak only when necessary. Brew only what is permitted. Touch nothing without blessing it. You're about to reach for a bucket when a monk physically redirects your hand with a frown sharp enough to slice cheese. You're learning. See, the monks live by Saint Benedict's rule, drafted in the 6th century and full of charming phrases like, "Prefer nothing to the work of God," and "drink in moderation." Moderation, though, is hilariously vague. What's moderate to a monk who hasn't had sugar in 6 years might feel like Oktoberfest to you. Historians still argue whether these guys were innocently sipping for sustenance or quietly day drinking with divine permission. One of the Abbey's oldest traditions is the belief that manual labor is sacred. Brewing beer, therefore, isn't just a job. It's a kind of prayer. You mash barley with your own hands, and it becomes something holy. You're essentially hugging the divine in liquid form with hops. Except, here's a twist. Some orders didn't allow hops. Yup, the bitter little plant that now defines modern beer was once considered medicinal, even suspicious. In this abbey, however, hops are permitted, but just barely. Brother Anselm jokes that if a bishop finds a stray vine growing near the abbey wall, he might assume it's witchcraft. You laugh. He does not. Your hands ache from stirring. The wooden paddle is unwieldy and the barley mash smells like wet cereal left in a car trunk. Still, there's something soothing about it. Repetitive, predictable. Unlike, say, your previous life outside the abbey walls, which was mostly unpredictable and occasionally involved debt collectors. You've seen the same faces return day after day, sometimes in the same clothes, always requesting the same oils or the same routine. You've learned who likes their baths hotter than others, who can't stand a drop of cold water, and who prefers to sit in the steamy room for hours, only leaving once the water begins to cool. But there's a strange thing about this ritual of theirs. They all behave as if it's some sacred practice, some essential part of their identity. It's more than just hygiene for them. Bathing is a moment of clarity, a space for reflection, a space where they believe they can scrub away not just the grime of the day, but also the weight of their status. But while they're soaking in the luxury, you're the one who sees the cracks in the system. You know the reality of how the bathhouse runs, how precarious everything truly is. You're the one who sees the danger in the smallest things. A slip on the wet floor, a sudden change in water temperature, or even the gradual buildup of oil slicks that could make the pools dangerously slippery. The bathhouse is a system that runs on precision and care, and the moment you slip up, someone is bound to notice. It could be the wrong temperature, an unpolished surface, or even the scent that's just a little too strong. And then there's the heat. Working in the bathhouse means you're constantly surrounded by warmth, sometimes too much of it. The steam fills your lungs. The heat settles deep in your muscles. And no matter how much you try to stay hydrated, there's always a feeling of suffocation. But you've grown used to it over the years. You learn to breathe through it, to accept it as part of the job. The Romans may have created the bathhouse as a place of pleasure, but for you, it's a furnace of endless labor. It's hard to describe the strange relationship you've developed with the heat. It's both a burden and a comfort. As the day drags on, more bathers pour in. The floor is covered in water now, and the sounds of laughter, chatter, and the clink of coins fill the air. You clean up after them, constantly moving from one task to another, all while your own body grows more tired. The work never stops. There's always someone who needs assistance, whether it's a fresh supply of oils or just a little help moving through the crowd. You've grown used to the sound of the bathers' voices, in the rhythmic slapping of your sandals against the wet floors. But there's a curiosity that lingers in the back of your mind. Why do the Romans place so much importance on the bathhouse? Historians still argue whether the Roman obsession with public baths was a means of socializing or an attempt at maintaining social control. The baths were places where Romans could mingle freely, away from the rigid constraints of class and status. However, for the attendants like you, it's less about social equality and more about survival, both physical and economic. You've seen the power dynamics play out in the bathhouse. The wealthy pay extra for a cleaner pool, a gentler hand with their oils, or even more privacy. The rest of the patrons, from the lower classes, make do with what they can. It's a strange, unspoken hierarchy that exists in the bathhouse. Even as the water flows and the steam rises, erasing any traces of those who came before. Yet, despite all of this, there's an undeniable comfort in the predictability of your work. It may be monotonous, grueling, and largely unappreciated, but it's your world. You know every crack in the marble, every bend in the hallway. The rhythms of the bathhouse are your rhythms, and you've learned how to navigate them with ease. In a way, you've become part of the bathhouse itself. The steam, the heat, the smells, they're all part of who you are now. And just as the bathhouse continues to hum with the sounds of life, so too do you continue, drifting through its corridors, maintaining the delicate balance that allows the wealthy elite to bathe in luxury. They may never see you, may never acknowledge your role in the grand scheme of things, but you are the keeper of this space. Without you, none of this would be possible. As the day goes on, the sounds of the bathhouse begin to swell, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. You hear the chatter of voices, the clinking of coins being exchanged for services, the quiet splash of water as bathers enter and exit the pools. Your work never stops. There's always something to be done, someone to assist, and someone to direct. Bathhouses are places of constant movement, of ebb and flow, just like the empire itself. The elite don't just come to bathe. They come to conduct business, to relax, and even to show off a little. It's not enough that they are wealthy. They must also show everyone around them that they are above the mundane concerns of the common folk. You've seen enough of it by now. Senators arrive dressed in their finest tunics, their jewelry catching the light as they walk through the steam-filled rooms. They sit in the warm water, discussing the latest political maneuverings, their voices laced with subtle power plays, all while you carefully attend to their needs. Some bathers seem to take comfort in the idea that they can control everything around them. They feel like masters of the universe as they lie back in the warm waters, letting their worries and cares slip away. But for you, the world is much more about managing those controls, keeping the balance between temperature, comfort, and your own quiet presence in the background. It's not glamorous work, but it's necessary sometimes. when you're in the middle of wiping down a stone pillar or fetching a new towel for someone, you catch fragments of their conversations. A senator might quietly confide to a merchant about the latest trade routes, or a wealthy patron might share a story about a family dispute, all while reclining in the warm water. You never intervene, of course. It's not your place. But you listen. It's a fascinating thing, hearing the whispered secrets of Rome's elite as they forget that someone like you is always within earshot. Occasionally, you'll overhear someone lamenting how their wealth doesn't protect them from the same things that plagued the rest of Rome: political intrigue, family betrayal, the constant battle for more power. For all their money and influence, they're just as vulnerable as the rest of the population, caught in the petty web of Roman society's ups and downs. In those moments, you almost feel a kinship with them. You, too, are stuck in a world that doesn't truly see you. You may be surrounded by the powerful, but you are never part of their world. The night shift is never easy. Your hands are still slick with the remnants of oils and soaps as you clean the floors, the edges of the pools, and wipe down every surface that might have been touched by a bather. You notice little things: scratches in the marble, stains on the walls from spilled oils, and you fix them carefully, methodically, because you know that tomorrow someone will notice if they're still there. As you work, you can't help but think about the strange paradox of your life. You're part of this world, but also apart from it. You maintain the luxury, the pomp, and circumstance of the bathhouse, but you are never allowed to enjoy it. You'll never be the one reclining in the warm water, relaxing after a day of politics or commerce. You'll never have the chance to bask in the same luxury that you helped create for others. In some ways, that's just the reality of being a worker in ancient Rome. It's not a glamorous job, and it's not a job that will ever bring you fame or fortune. But it's necessary. You are necessary. Without you, the bathhouse would fall apart. Without you, the powerful would lose their place of respite. And though they may never see you, never recognize you as a key figure in their world, they depend on you. It's a hard truth, but it's the truth you live with. The hierarchy of Roman society is a well-oiled machine, and you, like the gears that keep it turning, are essential to its operation. You've learned to accept your place in it, even if it means working tirelessly while others play. After all, you've seen enough of the elite to know that their lives, though full of wealth and status, are hardly free from complications. They have their own struggles, their own pressures, and sometimes their own loneliness. The conversation around you is one of privilege, but you're aware of the cracks. The senators, the merchants, the rich bathers, they might seem like they have it all. But the more you see of them, the more you understand that status is often a prison in disguise. You may not have their wealth or power, but at least you have something they don't: freedom from the constant scramble for more, the constant jockeying for position. But of course, that doesn't change your reality. The bathhouse calls you back, as it always does. The work is endless, and the patrons are already starting to filter in for the next day. You'll be back in the thick of it soon enough, mixing oils, cleaning floors, adjusting water temperatures, anticipating the needs of every patron. The cycle never stops, and you are always a part of it, always there, always working. Historians still debate the role of the bathhouse in Roman society. Was it a place for the elite to indulge and show off? Or was it a place for everyone, a public service that allowed even the poorest Romans access to water and a social space? It's a complicated issue, and like everything in Rome, the answer depends on perspective. From your point of view, it's both. The bathhouse serves the rich and the poor, but it's the workers like you who keep it running, who make it possible. And though the powerful may take the bathhouse for granted, you know the truth. Without you, the whole system would collapse. Tomorrow, there will be more faces, more requests, more needs. But for now, the bathhouse is still. The water in the pools calms, and the steam slowly dissipates. You stand there, looking around at the now empty chambers, the stillness settling over everything. There's a quiet satisfaction in this moment, the only one of the day when you can truly reflect. In the end, you know that your work is invaluable. It might not bring you fame or recognition, but it is necessary. You are part of the fabric of Roman life, and the empire couldn't function without the likes of you. The bathhouse will remain a symbol of power, wealth, and luxury, but it's also a place of labor. And as long as you are here, it will always be a place that work. The early morning light barely touches the edges of the bathhouse as you finish up the last of the evening's cleaning. The first few rays of the sun are just beginning to creep through the high windows. The air is still thick with the remnants of heat from the night, but there's a distinct chill that you can feel settling in. As the sun rises higher, the heat will return, and so will the crowds. But for now, in this brief moment of stillness, the bathhouse seems almost peaceful, an oasis untouched by the hustle and bustle of the day. You take a moment to lean against the cool stone of the wall and gather your thoughts. It's hard to put into words what the bathhouse means to you. It's your world, yes, but it's also a strange, detached world where you're both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. You see everything, yet you remain unseen. You witness the rituals of the powerful, their decadence, their conversations, but you never truly participate in it. In some ways, you're like a ghost, always in the background, always moving, never fully acknowledged. The bathhouse has its own rhythm, its own pulse, and you've learned to move with it. But there's something about the quietness before the crowds arrive that fills you with a rare sense of peace. It's like the calm before the storm. You know what's coming. Soon enough, the wealthy Romans will start to trickle in, each one with their own needs, their own demands, their own routine. They'll come in, step into the pools, and begin their daily ritual, oblivious to the fact that you're the one who's been setting the stage for them all along. As you begin preparing for the day ahead, adjusting the temperature of the water, arranging the towels, and setting out the oils, you can't help but think about the strange nature of your role in the empire. Here you are, a lowly bathhouse attendant, performing the same tasks every day. Yet without you, the entire system would collapse. The wealthy and powerful may think that they control their world, but it's the unnoticed workers like you who truly keep the gears turning. This invisible power is something you've learned to wield over time. You've seen how a simple adjustment to the water temperature can change a person's entire day, or how a perfectly applied oil can elevate someone's mood. They may never realize it, but their comfort depends on you. You know the bathhouse better than anyone, even better than the bathers themselves. You know which pools are the hottest, which are the coldest, and which rooms have the best acoustics for conversation. You've seen the subtle hierarchies play out in the way people move through the space. The rich take the prime spots, while the lower classes are relegated to the less desirable areas. But despite all this, there's a sense of anonymity in it all. The bathers come, use the space, and leave, often without a second thought about the attendants who make it all happen. You are the invisible force behind their pleasure, yet you are never acknowledged. The bathers will never know your name, never realize that you're the one who made sure the water was just the right temperature for their comfort. They'll never see the subtle touch you gave their oils, or the extra attention you paid to their needs when no one else was watching. Some days, you wonder why you do it. Why continue to serve a system that doesn't seem to care for you? Why keep up the charade of being invisible when you know you are indispensable? The answer is simple, really. It's because without you, the bathhouse wouldn't function. Without you, there would be chaos. Without you, the elite wouldn't have their precious moments of luxury. It's a strange paradox. The more you serve, the more invisible you become. The more you give, the less you receive. But somehow, that's how the system works. It's how Roman society works. The wealthy get their glory, their wealth, their power, while the workers like you remain in the background, making sure everything runs smoothly. It's not fair, but it's the reality you've learned to accept. Still, there are small pleasures to be found in your work. The satisfaction of a job well done, the quiet moments when the bathhouse is empty, and you can reflect on the subtle dance of the day. The feel of the cool stone beneath your hands as you adjust the pools, or the way the steam curls around your body as you prepare for another busy day. These moments of peace, fleeting though they are yours to hold on to. Historians still debate the social dynamics within the Roman bathhouse. Was it truly a place of equality, as some suggest, or a microcosm of the larger Roman class system, where the wealthy and powerful had access to the best, while the lower classes were relegated to the margins? It's an issue that's hard to resolve, especially from your perspective. You've seen both sides of the coin, the opulence of the elite and the subtle invisibility of the workers who make it all possible. There's something deeply Roman about the way the bathhouse reflects society at large. It's a place of indulgence, of luxury, but also of hierarchy and labor. The rich bathe in the finest pools, while the poor make do with less. The senators and merchants enjoy the best oils and the softest towels, while you and your fellow attendants do the work behind the scenes, ensuring that everything is perfect for them. It's a system that runs on subtle power dynamics, and you are the unseen force that keeps it all in motion. As the sun climbs higher, the bathhouse begins to stir with life. The first bathers are arriving, their feet slapping the marble floors as they make their way to the pools. You can feel the familiar rhythm of the day beginning to take hold, the hum of conversation, the clink of coins, the laughter echoing through the chambers. Soon, the heat will rise again, the steam will fill the air, and the bathhouse will once again be a place of indulgence and luxury for the elite. But for now, you are still here, still invisible, still essential. And in this moment, as the bathhouse comes to life once again, you can't help but wonder what the day will bring. The bathhouse fills quickly, as it always does. The air, once crisp and still, is now heavy with the mingling scents of oils, perfumes, and the steam rising from the pools. You watch as the bathers begin to settle into their respective spots, slipping into the water, soaking in its warmth, and starting the day's routine of relaxation and small talk. Some of the wealthier ones don't even dip into the water immediately, preferring instead to lounge by the pools, wrapped in plush towels, surrounded by attendants like yourself. They are here not just to bathe, but to elevate themselves, to maintain their place in the social pecking order. Their slow, deliberate movements as they ease into the water or sip from a glass of wine make it clear that this isn't just about cleanliness, it's a performance. You, however, are not a part of their performance. You are an actor in the background, doing your job with efficiency and quiet precision. There is something humbling about it. The way your efforts are completely invisible, even as you make their indulgences possible. You've learned, and to mine though, at least not as much as you did when you first started. You understand that this is your role now, and that it will never change. You're here to serve, to ensure that the powerful can enjoy their luxuries without a second thought. The way the bathhouse works is a delicate balance. If the water isn't hot enough, they'll complain. If it's too hot, they'll complain. If there's a delay in bringing them fresh oils or clean towels, you can almost hear the collective gasp of disappointment. You are always anticipating needs, always on your feet, always moving from one task to the next. It's exhausting work, yet you have come to understand the rhythm of it. You know when to step forward with a towel, when to adjust the temperature, when to leave the bathers to their own devices and quietly tend to other areas. There's an irony to it all. They come here to relax, to forget the worries of their world. But even in the bathhouse, they can't leave their political games behind. The bathhouse, in some ways, serves as a microcosm of the empire itself. People constantly jostling for power and position, trying to maintain their place at the top of the heap. You see it in their gestures, in the way they place their robes carefully on the side of the pool, or in how they subtly shift their bodies to face the most influential person in the room. For all the luxury they experience, they can never escape the competition, the constant need to prove themselves. As the day wears on, the bathhouse becomes a symphony of sounds. The splash of water, the soft murmur of voices, the occasional laugh or heated debate. The air is thick with steam, the marble floors glistening with moisture as you make your rounds. You adjust the temperatures, replenish the oils, offer towels, and anticipate requests before they're even made. You move through the bathhouse like a well-oiled machine, a ghost who tends to the needs of the living. Historians still argue whether the Roman bathhouses were a true place of social equality, or if they only reinforced the existing class divisions. While bathhouses offered access to water and a chance for all Romans to cleanse themselves, the reality was that the baths also perpetuated a sense of social stratification. The elite had their private areas, their own exclusive pools, and the staff who catered to them. The poorer bathers were relegated to the public pools, their interactions often overlooked, just like you, working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that the whole system functioned. It's strange to think about it all. You're a part of this world, yet you are never truly a part of it. You are caught in the space between the elites who use the bathhouse for leisure and the lower classes who use it out of necessity. You move between them, serving both, but belonging to neither. Yet, in a way, it's these very contradictions that keep the bathhouse running. As you prepare for the evening shift, you can already feel the bathhouse starting to empty out, the crowds dwindling down as the day's business concludes. The once bustling atmosphere will soon give way to the quiet calm of the night. But for now, the bathhouse is still alive, its rhythms continuing to pulse through the water, the conversations, the ever-present hum of Roman society in motion. As the evening approaches, the bathhouse begins to settle back into its usual routine. The last of the elite bathers have left, draped in freshly pressed tunics, their attendants trailing behind them with towels and oils. The air has begun to cool, the oppressive heat of midday replaced by a more comfortable warmth that still lingers on the marble tiles. The chatter has faded to soft murmurs, the occasional splash of water and the clinking of coins the only sounds remaining. It's in these moments, during the shift between day and night, that you feel the bathhouse's true soul. There's a certain finality to the way the last bathers depart. They leave behind half-drunk goblets of wine, forgotten towels, the scent of expensive oils still hanging in the air. You know the staff will come through later to clean up the remnants of the day. But for now, there's a sense of emptiness. The large, once bustling pools are now deserted, and the low murmur of voices has quieted to a gentle hum. It feels almost surreal, as though you've been transported to a different time or place, where the clamor of the world outside has been muted, and all that remains is the hushed calm of the bathhouse. See, before hops became the star of every IPA and bar argument, beer was flavored with whatever was local, legal, or not outright poisonous. The term for this medieval mixture, Brewed, a magical word that sounds like a sneeze, but meant an herbal cocktail unique to each abbey or region. Some added yarrow for bitterness, others sweet gale for aroma, and occasionally, if the day was lucky, a pinch of cinnamon or orange peel from distant trade caravans. This section's mainstream fact: hops didn't become standard until the late Middle Ages. Before then, most beer was flavored with these unpredictable Brewed blends. Hops had two big selling points. They acted as a preservative, and they offered a consistent bitterness that made beer more stable and shippable. Once brewers realized this, hops gradually replaced most herbal mixes, but not without protest. Some monasteries held on to their secret Brewed blends like family heirlooms. In fact, there's a quirky tidbit about a group of monks in Flanders who refused to switch to hops at all. They claimed hops stirred the blood and awakened unholy appetites. So instead, they loaded their brews with nettles and crushed pine needles. Rumor has it the beer tasted like spiced broom closet, but the villagers drank it anyway, mostly out of loyalty and maybe a little fear. Back in the brewery, Brother Tobias hands you a small stone mortar. You're assigned to crush coriander seeds. It's oddly satisfying. Little pops and snaps as the seeds break open, releasing a citrusy, peppery smell that sticks in your nose. Another monk, Brother Lionel, gently heats honey over a small fire. He doesn't speak, just hums an old hymn as the honey melts into a golden drizzle. This batch, you're told, is a high feast ale, brewed only once or twice a year. Stronger, deeper, served on saints' days or when a traveling bishop needs impressing. The recipe is written not in numbers, but in phrases like a monk's palm of sage or the whisper of smoke. Measurement by poetry. You love it. The mash is ready. And this time, you get to help stir. The paddle is massive, carved from ash wood and polished by generations of hands. The mixture bubbles like a swamp, but smells like an apothecary's daydream. Toasted grain, citrus, sweetness, earth. Someone adds a splash of licorice root extract. Another tosses in dried elderflower. It's a beer, yes, but it's also a liquid incantation. Tobias leans over and says quietly, "You ever hear of green beer dreams?" You blink. No. He grins. Some batches, when the mix is just right and the room is hot and the steam rises thick, you'll see things, Not visions exactly, more like echoes. He taps the side of his head. Memory smoke. The soul boiling off. Now, is this superstition? Likely, or maybe just dehydration. But some monks believed the combination of herbs and brewing heat could open what they called the ear of the spirit. Not quite a hallucination. Not quite a prayer. Something in between. Historians still argue whether this belief came from old pagan customs, blending with monastic ritual, or whether monks just got a little too cozy with the wormwood later, as the biwarki is cooled and the herbs steeped. You're tasked with writing today's batch name on a slate. You choose something suitably monkish. Sanctus Calor Noctis, holy heat of the night. Brother Lionel gives a low chuckle. Better than last week's, he mutters. Apparently, that one translated to the dripping gloom. By midday, the brew is sealed in large wooden casks and rolled into the cool cellar. These barrels are works of art, bound in iron rings, some carved with vines or animals or solemn faces. One even has a tiny inscription in Old Saxon that translates roughly to, "Don't open unless heaven's falling." During a break, the monks sit beneath the cloister arches, sipping yesterday's lighter batch and eating cold lentils with pickled onions. You're getting used to the taste, like boredom, but tangy. One brother recites beer blessings in Latin, while another absent-mindedly sketches hop leaves into the margin of a psalter. Conversation turns to relics, not bones or holy thorns, beer relics. There's talk of a lost recipe said to have been brewed by Saint Benedict himself, guarded by a now ruined abbey in the Alps. Supposedly, the ale was so potent it could knock a man flat after one goblet, but leave his soul joyful and intact. Another monk insists there's a scroll hidden somewhere in the abbey library that contains the recipe. Nobody's ever found it. But then again, few have looked. Beer relic quests aren't officially sanctioned. You start to wonder if these monks really need all this beer. But then someone mentions the plague year, how beer, boiled and sealed, was safer than the well water. How one brother credited beer with saving half the abbey. You suddenly see this place not as a brewery attached to a monastery, but a monastery kept alive by the brewery. As evening bells ring, the last of the Groot ale is tucked away to ferment. The air is thick with the mingled scents of honey, smoke, and thyme. You feel sleepy, not from drink, just full of old knowledge and warm steam. One monk taps your shoulder and asks if you'll join them for Compline, night prayers. You nod. On your way out, you glance back at the sealed casks. Some will age for weeks, some for months, and one or two might never be opened. You smile, imagining some future monk cracking into one on a snowy night, whispering, "Let's see what they left us." You hope they enjoy your coriander. After Compline, the world slips into velvet silence. You lie in your straw-stuffed cot, half listening to the rustle of habits and the distant drip of condensation from the stone ceiling. But just as your mind begins to drift, you remember the barrels downstairs, the ones brimming with potion-like ale, and realize the monks aren't exactly done with them once they're sealed. After Compline, the world slips into velvet silence. You lie in your straw-stuffed cot, half listening to the rustle of habits and the distant drip of condensation from the stone ceiling. But just as your mind begins to drift, you remember the barrels downstairs, the ones brimming with potion-like ale, and realize the monks aren't exactly done with them once they're sealed. Next morning, you're introduced to one of the Abbey's most unsung tools of brewing: patience. Fermentation isn't some quick, flashy trick. It's slow magic, quiet transformation. And unlike almost everything else in the medieval world, it can't be rushed by prayer or punishment. The yeast decides. You follow Brother Oswin down into the cool stone cellar, where it smells like damp oak and secrets. The beer barrels are resting, waiting, some covered with wax-sealed lids, others fitted with airlocks that burp softly, releasing the tiniest hints of gas. They're breathing, Oswin says with pride. That's how you know they're alive. Mainstream fact time. Medieval brewers didn't fully understand yeast. They knew fermentation happened, and they knew if the beer didn't bubble, something was wrong. But the invisible workings, total mystery. It wouldn't be until the 17th century that yeast was observed under a microscope. Until then, monks called it God's little helper, kind of like holy bacteria. Yet somehow, without lab coats or fancy thermometers, they nailed it. Through trial, prayer, and the occasional exploded cask, monks figured out that cooler temperatures gave smoother beer, that some fermentations did better with open tops, that wood from certain trees lent different flavors. They were medieval scientists in sandals. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries placed relics, yes, actual sacred bones, on their barrels to bless the beer and encourage cooperation from the spirits within. One Irish abbey even dipped rosaries into the wort. You're pretty sure it didn't change the taste, but hey, who argues with results? The real magic, though, is how monks adjusted recipes depending on the yeast's personality. That's right, personality. They believed different yeast strains had different temperaments. Some bubbled with joy. Others were slow and meditative. And if a yeast ever got stubborn, monks might sing psalms in the cellar or light incense to cheer it up. Historians still argue whether these rituals affected fermentation or simply calmed the brewers. Both are valid. While you're staring at a quietly humming barrel, Brother Oswin offers you a tiny cup of green beer. Not St. Patty's shamrock soup, but beer that's only partially fermented. It's cloudy, a little sour, and has a weirdly bready aftertaste. Honestly, not bad, but it makes you think, how did monks know when beer was done? Turns out, finishing beer was part science, part instinct, part superstition. Some monks would flick the side of the barrel and listen for a hollow cheer. Others tasted with slivered reeds or dipped in white cloth to see how the foam stained. And at some abbeys, the brewmaster swore by dreams. If he dreamt of overflowing chalices or rivers running golden, the beer was ready. You wander further into the cellar. Some barrels are very old, covered in dust. A few marked with Latin warnings like "Not before Advent" or "Open only on Resurrection." You're told some of these are triple fermented and incredibly strong. One cask is simply labeled "Patience." Another says "Regret" with a question mark. You find a bench, sit, and breathe it all in. The cool air, the gentle scent of malt and thyme, the memory of that herbal brew from the day before. It's almost trance-like, and for a moment, you understand why monks call this part of the process the listening stage. Not long after, a novice monk comes in holding a thick ledger. It's the brew journal. Every monastery worth its salt, or hops, kept one. And their works of art. Handwritten, of course, leather-bound. Many monks illuminated theirs like holy texts, decorated margins, tiny gold leaf dragons curled around barley diagrams. You flip through it. Dates, names, weird phrases like "a bitter January," "needed extra nettle," and "Brother Julian fainted again, use less wormwood." Modern brewers would kill for these notebooks. The ledger lists brewing successes and failures. You read of a batch that exploded in 1342. A cask rolled into the cloister pond. Another went black and wrong and was buried like a fallen soldier. There's a star drawn next to a recipe labeled Lady Ale, crafted by a visiting nun who apparently had an unnatural instinct for balance and spice. You hope someone named a hallway after her. You ask Brother Oswin, what happens if beer fails completely? He sighs. We pray. Then we drink it anyway. Fair enough. Lunchtime approaches, and you're invited to help carry yesterday's finished ale up to the dining hall. It's a lighter brew today, barely alcoholic, more like grainy soda than beer, but perfect for keeping hydrated during Lenten meals of boiled root and penitent stew. As you pass monks in the hallway, they nod, eyeing the clay jugs with respect. At the meal, the ale is blessed, poured, and passed. It pairs surprisingly well with leeks and barley bread. One monk swirls it in his cup like it's fine wine and mutters, "Hints of hay, slightly barney." Another nudges you and whispers, "That's just his tongue." After lunch, Brother Tobias mentions that fermentation isn't just for beer. Monks used similar methods for preserving fruits, making vinegar, even preparing medicines. The abbey had an entire alcove dedicated to fermented cabbage. You're less excited about that. Still, there's a sense that everything in this world, from grain to groot to gassy bubbles, is a slow collaboration between nature, patience, and prayer. The monks don't control fermentation. They coax it. like horse whisperers, but for yeast. Before evening prayers, you return once more to the cellar. Alone now, you walk past the barrels and pause by one labeled Anima Fortis, strong soul. You rest your hand on its lid, wondering what's fermenting beneath. A gift to a future winter, a toast to the next abbot, or maybe just another Tuesday night miracle. You wake to a distant bell, muffled beneath thick wool blankets and the hum of monastic predictability. Your limbs feel heavy, partly from sleep, partly from the day's quiet labor, and maybe, just maybe, from that extra cup of almost beer Brother Oswin snuck you before Compline. Today, you're promised something different. Less silence, more trade. Because while monks may have taken vows of poverty and isolation, the brewing monks, oh, they had neighbors. And neighbors had silver. You shuffle through the early mist alongside a small group of monks heading beyond the abbey walls. They're pushing a handcart covered in waxed cloth and judging by the glug, glug, glug with every rut in the path, it's full of bottled ale. Your morning exercise? Welcome to the medieval beer economy. Mainstream fact. Despite their cloistered reputation, many monastic communities were deeply involved in commerce. Their beer, consistently safer than most water, became a valued product, especially for pilgrims, nobles, and local villagers. Some abbeys, like those in Belgium or southern Germany, became legendary for their brewing skill. Their ales reaching distant markets via wagons and river routes. Your first stop is a small market town a few miles down the hill. You expect dusty stalls and suspicious glances, but instead, you are met with enthusiastic greetings. The monks are known here, not just as spiritual guides, but as beer guys. One butcher even refers to Brother Anselm as Yeast Whisperer. The name sticks. There's a designated stall in the square, marked with the abbey's symbol, a sheaf of barley inside a crucifix. It's subtle branding, but effective. The cloth is pulled back, revealing ceramic jugs, sealed with beeswax, stamped with initials. You help arrange them carefully, trying not to drop the particularly lively one that's still bubbling. A passing boy peers in and asks, "Does it make you see God?" Brother Tobias just smiles and says, "Sometimes. Depends on the dose." Here comes the quirky bit. Medieval abbeys often use different symbols to mark alcohol strength. Some use crosses, stars, or dots. Others painted animal shapes, like hedgehogs for light ale and lions for the heavy hitters. One rather cheeky abbey marked their strongest brew with a small drawing of a monk flat on his back. As the townspeople trickle in, jugs begin to vanish into baskets and cloaks. Payment comes in all forms. Silver coins, bundles of dried herbs, even a chicken that eyes you suspiciously. One old woman trades a loaf of honey bread for a pint, then mutters, "This'll help my joints better than those saint bones." You don't ask. But here's the rub. How could monks, vowed to a life without greed, profit off beer? Isn't commerce kind of unmonkish? This is where it gets a little gray. Historians still argue whether monastic brewing violated the Benedictine rule, which warned against personal wealth and worldly trade. Some claim it was justified because profits went back into the monastery to fund charity, repairs, and more beer. Others suggest certain abbots got a little too comfortable with the gold-lined tankards. One account even mentions a Bavarian monastery with a private orchestra of monks. Still, as you watch Brother Oswin hand a free cup to a limping shepherd and offer 2 more for the man's sons, you see the other side of the coin. Beer wasn't just a product. It was hospitality in liquid form, warmth, nutrition, something to soften the harshness of medieval life. By noon, the last jug is gone, and your cart is significantly lighter, though the chicken remains. He's now named Gregory and has perched himself atop the empty barrel like a feathery supervisor. You all agree he can come home. The return walk is slower, but not solemn. The monks joke. One of them sings a low chant that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. You ask about rules. Were monks allowed to drink, and how much? Brother Tobias answers, "We're allowed a modica quantites, a moderate amount, but the rule of Saint Benedict never really defined what moderate meant." He winks. So we improvise. Modern scholars think most monks drank around a gallon of weak ale a day, mostly as hydration. Stronger ales were saved for feast days or celebrations, like the feast of St. Gall, patron of brewers. And yes, there were drinking games, not beer pong, but versions involving dice, riddles, or even hymn recitation under influence. Slur a syllable. Take another sip. You reach the abbey gates as the sun starts its descent. The porter lets you in with a knowing glance at the empty cart and the new feathery companion. Back inside, the mood is relaxed. Trade Day always carries a subtle energy, like everyone's secretly pleased with the small chaos it brings. In the refectory, the monks lift their cups and toast quietly. Gratias Deo pro fermento. You echo the phrase, unsure whether they're thanking God for the beer or the yeast. Probably both. Later, you slip into the scriptorium, where a monk is copying recipes from the brewing journal onto fresh vellum. These are to be sent to a sister abbey 100 miles away. You ask why not just send a sample instead. He raises an eyebrow. You can copy ink. You can't copy taste. Fair point. The night draws on. Somewhere in the distance, a chant rises, half prayer, half lullaby. The corridors feel warmer, more lived in. Even the stone walls seem to hum, like they've soaked up centuries of barley steam in whispered toasts. You settle near the kitchen hearth, Gregory asleep in your lap. and reflect on what you've seen. Not just brewing as craft, but as connection. Between people, between places, even between centuries. This wasn't just about monks and beer. It was about survival, generosity, and the small joys hidden in frothy mugs passed between calloused hands. And if that joy sometimes slipped a little over the line into too much joy, well, moderation is subjective. The moon rises soft and swollen as you tiptoe down another long corridor, one hand grazing the stone wall for balance. The abbey is half asleep. Half because monks never fully rest. There's always someone up, somewhere, chanting or watching the brew room thermometer, or rather, the medieval equivalent, sticking a finger into a barrel and guessing. Tonight, however, you're not headed to pray or clean or chant. No. You've been invited to the second tasting, a rare midnight ritual known only to a few insiders. And if that sounds like something between a secret club and a covert party, it absolutely is. The cellar door groans open. Candles flicker along the steps. The air shifts from dry stone to dense, yeasty musk. You descend into the warm belly of the abbey, past hanging ropes of drying herbs and rows of sealed jugs that look like they haven't been touched since the Black Death. And there they are, 5 monks, huddled around a massive wooden vat, lit only by the honey glow of tallow candles. Brother Oswin lifts a ladle and sips. His eyes close. He nods. Still young, he says, but promising. You try it. It tastes like bread, sunlight, and something smoky. Maybe cloves? Or is that just the candle wax? Mainstream, historical fact. Monastic breweries had strict quality control, often tasting at several stages. Mash, fermentation, storage. Just like today's microbreweries. Some abbeys developed complex grading systems. Others simply relied on experience, habit, and a particularly honest palate. While wine was often considered holier, beer was the drink of everyday monks, and it had to be good. The real reason for this late-night tradition? Well, several reasons. First, fewer prying eyes. Technically, monks weren't supposed to indulge, but if the sample accidentally needed 2 sips instead of 1, who's counting in the dark? Second, it's the best time to catch off flavors. The night air is still. The cellar echoes. A bad batch announces itself with a sour bite or a musty twang. The monks joke about one disastrous brew that tasted like wet sheep and regret. Quirky tidbit. One monastic brewery in 13th century Bohemia was rumored to sing to its beer. Each batch received a unique Gregorian chant as it fermented. Whether this actually changed the flavor or was just a medieval version of branding remains unclear. But the practice was passed down for nearly a century before disappearing during a fire that also destroyed the abbey's musical archives. Tonight's batch, though, sings all on its own. Not literally, but metaphorically. It's mellow, slightly sweet, with a hint of bitterness at the end, like a monk's gentle scolding. You learn that some monks kept private flavor journals, pages filled with tasting notes like smells like baked pears or might cure melancholy. In fact, one illuminated manuscript contains a drawing of a smiling monk holding a mug and pointing at the caption, "Better than confession." And then comes the debate. Should this batch be aged another week? Or is it ready for the feast day of St. Bridget? One monk argues that longer aging might deepen the flavor. Another says it's already balanced. A third points out the dwindling stockpile from the last feast day. You sip quietly, pretending to be neutral, but your second helping gives you away. This, it turns out, is a common monastic dilemma. Historians still argue whether monks brewed primarily for necessity or celebration. Was beer a tool for survival, hydration, and trade? Or was it sometimes a justifiable pleasure? Some argue that feast days, dozens sprinkled through the calendar, gave monks plenty of excuses to bend the rules in favor of full mugs and cheerful evenings. As the argument dies down, Brother Tobias shrugs. If it's drinkable, it's ready. He ladles a portion into a smaller jug, corks it, and marks it with a wax seal. It'll be set aside for the abbot's approval, possibly served at Sunday supper. The rest? It'll continue fermenting under watchful eyes and hopeful noses. Then something unexpected. Brother Oswin offers a toast. Quiet, reverent, yet undeniably cheeky. To the barley and the barrel, to silence and second servings. The others echo him, mugs clinking gently. A silence follows, not the heavy, pious kind, but a warm one, like wool around the shoulders, like candlelight behind your eyelids. You begin to notice how even this late-night ritual is a form of worship, brewing as a prayer, not just in chants or blessings, but in the attention, the care, the patience. These monks may have taken vows, but they didn't abandon joy. They just distilled it into something they could share. A final joke. Brother Anselm claims the yeast is getting more intelligent with each generation, slowly learning Latin and forming unions. No one laughs louder than he does. As the group disbands, each monk vanishing into the dark with a candle and a hum, you linger in the cellar. You trail a finger along the side of the barrel. The wood is warm, just faintly pulsing, like it's alive. And maybe it is. The yeast still churns. The beer still breathes. Somewhere, deep in the froth, the abbey's heartbeat goes on. Back in your cell, the taste still clings to your tongue. Earthy, slightly spicy, unexpectedly comforting. You wake to bells again. Always the bells. Only this time, they're gentler, farther off, perhaps muffled by the fog curling through the cloister arches. Your feet find the cold stone floor, as if on their own, your hands automatically reaching for your rough-spun robe. Today is the feast of St. Bridget, and that means Among other things, a formal unveiling of the latest batch. The morning air is damp and thick with the scent of smoke and baking rye. In the distance, sheep bleat their concerns to no one in particular, and a rooster shouts as if he's been personally offended by the sun's delay. You join the line of monks shuffling toward the refectory, where the breakfast porridge waits in all its humble, lumpy glory. But the real anticipation hums underneath every robe and hood. It's not about the oats. It's about the beer. Yes, the latest brew, the very one you sampled last night, is finally ready for public consumption. Not just for the monks either. Today, a few villagers will be allowed inside the abbey's outer court. Pilgrims, beggars, local nobles in need of divine approval. They'll all be given a taste, a crumb, a prayer, mainstream historical fact. Medieval abbeys often functioned as proto-pubs, especially on feast days. While monks generally weren't allowed to drink to excess, emphasis on generally, beer flowed more freely during celebrations. Some monasteries even handed out tokens for free pints to visitors, a holy version of happy hour. As you help set the long wooden tables, rough planks set atop barrels, you hear the gentle clinking of mugs being arranged. A few jugs have already been uncorked. Their rich, malty scent wafts through the refectory like incense, sanctifying the very air. Of course, this beer is still liquid bread, but today it's not just a sustenance. It's a symbol of craft, of community, of permission to relax just a little. Even within sacred walls, people need reminders that joy is part of the divine equation. And that's where the fringe element creeps in. Brother Wulfric always wanted to skate the line between piety and party. Tells you about the Brigid's Brew incident of 1278. The monks, inspired by a legend that Saint Brigid once turned bathwater into beer, attempted their own miracle by brewing an entire batch using leftover dishwater. Spoiler, it tasted like disappointment and spoons. But here's the part historians still argue about. Was that stunt an act of mockery or devotion? Some scholars suggest it was a genuine attempt to test the bounds of faith, while others argue it was a thinly veiled excuse to mess around with hops and hygiene. Either way, it became local legend. The phrase, "tastes like Brigid's Brew," is still used by a few grumpy old abbots to describe anything that turns out badly. Your task for the day is dignified, if slightly sticky, assisting with mug distribution. You line up next to a barrel, dip the ladle, and pour over and over. The villagers arrive one by one. Grizzled shepherds, barefoot children, traveling merchants wearing too much perfume. Each receives a mug, a nod, and occasionally a crumb of goat cheese. No one complains. Even the warm, foamy head of the beer draws a few satisfied sighs. You begin to notice the rhythms of the day, the murmurs of Latin grace, the quiet laughter during cleanup, the way the monks politely disagree about whether the batch has notes of plum or a suspicious tang of juniper. You're certain it's neither. But you nod solemnly anyway. A particularly cheerful friar suggests using honey next time. Another swears by wild cherries. Brother Oswin sighs and mutters something about barley being enough, if people would just let it be barley. This is not a fight they'll win today. On feast days, imagination flows almost as freely as the beer. You sneak a few sips between refills, not enough to sway your balance, just enough to feel the warmth spread from your stomach to your cheeks. The brew tastes smoother today. The sharpness from last night has mellowed into a round, satisfying fullness. A visiting noble asks how the monks keep their beer so consistent. Brother Tobias responds with a smile and a shrug. Prayer, he says. The noble chuckles, but you suspect Tobias isn't joking entirely. And then, in a quiet moment, a curious thing happens. A blind man approaches your barrel. He carries a wooden mug, carved with vines and tiny birds. You fill it gently. He sniffs the beer, sips once, and says, tastes like the years turning. You're not quite sure what that means, but it sits in your chest for hours afterward like a candle left burning. By afternoon, the celebration shifts outside. There's music of a sort. Bells, flutes, clapping. Someone juggles apples. A sheep wears a flower crown. It's chaos. It's laughter. It's the most joy you've seen since arriving at the Abbey. And still, the beer pours, carefully, reverently, as though every mug contains not just fermentation, but memory. You overhear two monks discussing next season's batch. Should they try toasted oats? Maybe switch to copper kettles instead of wooden ones. Historians still argue whether monastic brewing techniques were passed down orally or meticulously recorded. The truth likely lies somewhere between faded scrolls and stubborn muscle memory. You think of last night's tasting, of Brother Oswin's quiet nod, and wonder, is this what devotion tastes like? Evening draws near. The sun slides sideways, casting long golden arms across the courtyard. A final round of beer is poured for those who've lingered. Monks, pilgrims, beggars alike. The barrels are lighter now, the monks sleepier. You return the ladle to its hook, wipe your hands. Watch as a small girl tries to imitate a monk's solemn bow. Everyone smiles. And in that smile, under layers of stone, starch, and silence, you feel the Abbey's heart again. Beating, brewing, becoming. Evening has its own rhythm here, one that wraps you in comfort, whether you're ready for it or not. The courtyard slowly empties. A few villagers bowing and muttering thanks as they shuffle back through the Abbey's outer gate. Behind them, their footprints smear in the soft earth, erased gradually by dew and low light. You, meanwhile, are helping to roll the emptied beer barrels back toward the cellar, the echo of the day's laughter still faint in your ears. The air is cooler now, and you can finally hear yourself think again. Today's feast is over. But the consequences of celebration, of brewing, of sacred indulgence linger. The air is cooler now, and you can finally hear yourself think again. Today's feast is over, but the consequences of celebration, of brewing, of sacred indulgence linger. You trudge to the garden, a place where the hops first began, curled up like sleeping cats against their trellises, now resting under the moon. It's peaceful here. Damp earth, the whisper of breeze, the occasional flutter of something winged. You pluck a withered cone from a low-hanging vine and roll it between your fingers. The scent is faint now, ghosts of citrus herbs, maybe a little bitterness. Mainstream historical fact: hops weren't always a given in medieval beer. In fact, before hops took center stage, European brewers favored Brewed, a blend of herbs and spices: yarrow, rosemary, juniper, even henbane. Yes, henbane. Sleepy little nightshade that occasionally induced hallucinations and definitely violated modern food safety laws. The switch to hops was gradual, but monks were among the first to standardize it. Their notes, when they actually wrote things down, praise hops for their preservative power. Less spoilage, more stability, more monk-like predictability. But here's a fringe tidbit that makes your eyebrow twitch. Some early brewing monks believed hops discouraged carnal thoughts. The bitter herb was thought to cool the blood, which might explain why monks preferred it over aphrodisiac gruit blends. Less temptation, more sanctity. Or maybe they were just tired of the hallucinations. You glance at the abbey walls, at the windows, where candlelight flickers like sleepy fireflies. Inside those stone cells, silence has returned with a vengeance. Vespers are done. The fire's low. Most of the monks are already curled under their woolen blankets, whispering psalms into pillows. But not you. You've been summoned again, not by a bell this time, by Brother Oswin. A nod, a flick of the eyes toward the stairwell that leads beneath the chapel. He doesn't say anything as you follow him. The air grows colder with each step, the kind of cold that holds old secrets tight. Your fingers graze the damp stone wall. Somewhere ahead, water drips, rhythmic as breath. You arrive at a narrow room, barely more than a crawl space. One wall is lined with parchment-covered shelves. Another holds strange metal instruments, long spoons, sieves, a hammer, and, oddly, what looks like an ancient hairbrush. This, Oswin says softly, is our record. You arrive at a narrow room, barely more than a crawl space. One wall is lined with parchment-covered shelves. Another holds strange metal instruments, long spoons, sieves, a hammer, and, oddly, what looks like an ancient hairbrush. This, Oswin says softly, is our record. You tilt your head. Our brewing record. And suddenly, the scrolls make sense. Ingredient logs, rainfall notations, yeast behavior, barley dryness. Scribbled in Latin, Old French, and something you think might just be angry shorthand. Historians still argue whether monastic beer logs were meant for replication or ritual. Were monks truly aiming to refine their recipes, or were they embedding spiritual meaning in every detail, treating brewing as a form of liturgy? No one agrees. And frankly, staring at these chaotic notes, neither do you. But Oswin hands you a scroll anyway. It's dated nearly 100 years ago. Ink faded, corners chewed by mice, or maybe boredom. It reads like poetry, if poetry were written by someone obsessed with foam consistency and barley ratios. Still, there's something beautiful in it. The reverence, the care, the simple belief that making beer well is a holy act. We've tried to match this batch, Oswin murmurs, running his fingers across the parchment like it's skin. Still never quite the same. He smiles at you then, so faintly you almost miss it, and gestures toward the final shelf. A single wooden box sits there sealed with wax. This, he says, is the mother yeast. You blink, passed down, fed weekly like a pet. You're not sure whether to laugh or kneel. He's serious. The yeast lives, has lived, for generations. You lift the lid, and inside is a ceramic jar, barely larger than a fist. You half expect it to hiss, but it's silent, still. A sleeping culture of microscopic monks, perhaps. Outside, an owl calls. You roll onto your side, the scent of beer and parchment still clinging to your robes. Tomorrow, you'll feed the mother yeast for the first time. Brother Oswin said so. He also said not to drop the jar. That part he repeated 3 times. You smile into the dark. Then, finally, sleep finds you. You wake with a start, but the silence is soft, almost like the abbey itself is still dreaming. No bells, no hurried footsteps, just the slow, steady breath of stone and wood settling after the day's warmth. You stretch beneath your woolen blanket. This, Oswin says, is how our beer remembers. You close the lid gently. You remember your first mug, its bite, its roundness, the way it felt like you were being welcomed and warned all at once. Above your heads, the monastery dreams. Below it, this yeast waits. It doesn't know about feast days, or Bridget, or dinner bells. It just lives, grows, ferments, as it always has. You leave the cellar with hands that smell of parchment and old hops. Back in your cell, you lie awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it means to carry a tradition, wondering what it means to quietly nourish something week after week so that others can taste joy. Today feels different, somehow. Like the air itself hums with quiet expectation. Maybe it's the way the dawn light filters through the small, stained glass window near your bed, painting tiny patches of color on the cold floor. Maybe it's the memory of the mother yeast jar, resting somewhere deep in the cellar, waiting for you. You dress slowly, your robe still rough, but comforting. The day begins not with a call to prayer, but with a different kind of ritual, the feeding of the yeast. Brother Oswin met you in the hallway, eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and solemnity. Remember, he says, yeast is like a living prayer. Treat it with respect, but don't worship it. You nod, the words sinking in like a gentle chant. Down in the cellar, the air is thick with damp and faint warmth from the earth itself. You find the wooden box, carefully sealed with wax. Your fingers tremble slightly as you lift the lid again, revealing the ceramic jar inside. You cradle it as if holding a fragile promise. The mother yeast looks unremarkable, just a cloudy liquid, a few bubbles rising like whispered prayers. But you know better. This is the heartbeat of the Abbey's brewing tradition, alive for centuries. You add the fresh wort, the sugary water made from fekloiper, malted barley prepared by brother. Wulfric's steady hands to the jar, stirring gently with a wooden spoon. The yeast stirs in response, tiny bubbles bursting to the surface. There's something almost magical about this exchange. The way life springs from sugar and water, the invisible dance of microbes turning sweet into spirit. Mainstream historical fact: medieval monks developed some of the earliest forms of yeast cultivation, often keeping their own mother cultures alive and passing them down for generations. This practice helped stabilize beer quality long before microbiology was even a word. But here's a quirky twist. Some brewing manuscripts suggest that monks believed yeast could carry the soul of the beer. They treated it almost like a sacred relic, the breath of fermentation, which might explain why they were so careful never to waste it. Scholars still debate whether this belief was genuine religious reverence or a poetic metaphor for an essential brewing ingredient. Either way, it's charming to think of yeast as tiny monks, praying and working invisibly in their ceramic monasteries. You finish feeding the mother yeast and close the lid with care. The jar feels lighter now, as if energized by the fresh food. You wonder if it recognizes you as its keeper, or if it simply bubbles on, indifferent and eternal. As you climb back up the stairs, the Abbey is waking. Morning prayers echo faintly in the distance, the voices weaving together like a soft, ancient melody. You join the other monks in the chapel, the scent of incense and candle wax enveloping you. Later, in the brewery, the air buzzes with energy. Brother Tobias discusses plans for experimenting with different barley strains next season, while Sister Helena, who surprisingly brews as well, shares a secret recipe involving elderflowers. You notice how the brewing process is less a science and more a living tradition, passed through hands, hearts, and years. Every batch is a dialogue between past and present, craft and faith. You take a moment to reflect on how far this simple drink has come, from humble ale to holy ritual, from accidental discovery to monastic pride. As the sun climbs higher, the abbey hums with activity. You carry on with your tasks, feeling part of something much larger than yourself. The yeast will keep working, you think, as long as someone feeds it. The day drifts by in soft rhythms. The clink of wooden buckets, the steady drip of water from the stone spouts, the low murmur of prayers mixing with the occasional burst of laughter from the novices. You're back in the brew house. The warm scent of malt and hops wrapping around you like a familiar blanket. Somewhere nearby, Brother Wolfric is carefully stirring a vat, his brow furrowed in that particular way that means he's both focused and just a bit annoyed. You watch the bubbling liquid, the foam rising and falling like a slow breath. Brewing is a strange mix of art and science, an alchemy practiced with devotion and a little bit of luck. The monk's secret wasn't just the recipe, but the patience to wait and the willingness to learn from each batch's failures. Remember how we talked about monks using herbs before hops became king? Well, the transition wasn't overnight. Some monasteries held on to their traditional Groot mixtures for decades, blending yarrow, rosemary, and even some more dangerous plants like henbane and hemlock. Yes, hemlock. The same plant that allegedly ended Socrates' career. A little unsettling to imagine sipping on something that might have doubled as a slow poison. But medieval folks had different ideas about safety and flavor. Interestingly, some monasteries brewed beer not only as sustenance, but as medicine. The belief was that beer, especially when made with certain herbs, could soothe ailments ranging from stomach aches to melancholy. There's even speculation that the alcohol content was mild enough to hydrate monks safely, especially when water quality was suspect. A kind of medieval sports drink, without the Gatorade branding, of course. Historians still argue whether monks' brewing was primarily spiritual service or a commercial enterprise masked by piety. Some believe the beer was sold to fund the monastery's needs, while others insist it was brewed purely for internal consumption and charity. The truth might be a bit of both. After all, monks were pragmatic when it came to survival. As you help ladle freshly brewed beer into wooden casks, you notice Brother Oswin wiping his hands on his robe, eyeing the vats with a mixture of pride and critical evaluation. He reminds you of a craftsman who knows every imperfection in his work and is never quite satisfied. Yet that's part of the magic, the quest for perfection in something as delightfully imperfect as beer. And then there's the community aspect. Brewing was rarely a solo affair. It was a shared ritual, a social glue. Every sip connected you to the hands that brewed it, the fields that grew the barley, the prayers that sanctified the day. You wonder if the yeast in that little jar deep underground also feels this connection, like an invisible thread stitching past and present, spirit and substance. As twilight deepens, you step outside. The Abbey's silhouette cuts sharply against the sky, stars beginning to wink awake. The scent of fresh bread from the bakery mingles with the last faint traces of hops on the breeze. Somewhere, laughter echoes faintly, a reminder that even in solemn vows, there's room for joy. You breathe in deeply, savoring this moment of quiet companionship across centuries.